mean, you've had quite the journey as it pertains to working in the technology industry. You've built some of the most killer engineering teams that have ever existed. You started your journey at Michigan, you know, from an education perspective. You went through hyperscale, hypergrowth at Uber, went through growth at Sonder. Today you're at Goodwater Capital. Can you take me through that journey?
First job out of school was, lowly engineer, cushy job, very slow. It wasn't internet or anything. It was actually semiconductor. All my friends, got keen on the internet. Google was a thing. Facebook was a thing. And all my friends were building apps and getting rich. And I was like, man, I want some of that. So then after the boring job, I dove into startups for, let's say, 6 years or so. Right. So 6 years in a boring company, 6 years doing a bunch of random stuff. Basically just consumer tech startups. Some success, some failures. Then I was like, hey, I want to join a real company, a rocket ship, Uber. Uber was blowing up at that time.
When you joined Uber, it was a team of around, let's just call it 500, saw absolute ridiculous scale over the next handful of years. When you look back at that time, was there anything that stood out to you? Is there anything you take away from that has been very applicable in other roles, other companies? What was the craziest part of that?
The major themes are like, what is it like to operate and navigate in like a hyper growth environment, both from a business perspective, but also like a team perspective? Very complicated. What was it like, at least for my journey? That was the first time I became like a real manager. Because before that, we kind of just pretend to be CTO. Like, it's just fake titles we just throw around in startups, right?
Sure.
That was the first time I became like a real manager. So that was a big transition for me. And then after that, it was a very chaotic place that was very controversial. And so how do you just like function when all this stuff is going on, as an individual psychologically? It's just a lot of crazy stuff. Anyways, I would say the combination of this hyper growth environment and also kind of switching to manager and figuring that out, like that was probably the biggest growth, I guess, experience for me. Because at least for Uber at that time, it was a bunch of kids, with a lot of money, right? Sure. And we hired a bunch of kids who wanted a lot of money, right? So just a bunch of kids. We don't know what to do. There were some adults in the room, but mostly
it sounds to me like it was. You were seeing remarkable scale. It was chaotic, if I'm reading between the lines.
Yeah.
And as a manager, to manage and lead in a totally chaotic, absolutely ridiculous scale type of environment was probably incredible training in some ways for you. That
like if you way to learn how to be a manager,
right, just throw you 100% into the fire.
I don't recommend it, but if you can survive. So basically, there's like, you go to Google and they have this program called like, manager training, and it's like very guided. There's like a learning and development team. You have these handbooks. Like, that's like you go to college and you learn how to be a manager. And then there's Uber, which is throw you in the fire and see what happens. And when I think about all my peers who had also transitioned, because we didn't know how to hire managers. So we just turned ICs to managers. But there was no like filtering. It was like, hey, you want to be a manager? Cool. But when I look at all my peers at that time, I would say like 99% of them failed out, after like a year. Because one, your team is doubling all the time. Two, like there's all this crazy stuff going on. Three, the servers are falling apart. Like, it's just like, it's definitely one of the deepest deep ends you can throw somebody. And that's why a lot of bad stuff happened, because you have all these managers who are inexperienced in this weird environment. Like, no wonder bad stuff happens. Right? So anyways, that was my proving ground. And that made me a man.
Gotcha.
I could do it for that.
Gotcha. If you could survive that and come out on the other side, you can kind of survive anything. So your journey at Uber ends in 2017, 18, 17?
So basically the beginning of 2018. That's when I hit my 4-year vest. I joined January 20th of 2014, and I left January 20th, 2018.
Gotcha. So when you left, the team at Uber was what, many thousand at that point?
Yeah. I think it was like close to 10,000. I don't know the exact number, but it was a real big company across the globe. Global company.
That's pretty nutty. So
Yeah.
So you go from this chaotic scale, chaotic growth, and you join another rocket ship in Sonder. And at the
Yeah.
time, I think when you joined Sonder, it was a much smaller engineering team. I
It's
think
tiny.
around 5, 10, 7. I think you mentioned at one point. And
Yeah.
what was,
I was,
well, yeah,
I was employee 110 or something like that there. So a little earlier
gotcha.
than Uber.
So you're brought in at Sonder to effectively build the engineering team, scale the engineering team out, lead that team. What was that like?
So I think my observation joining a lot of companies is that so a lot of companies just don't have like the right process and structure in place, right? Like the just a bunch of kids in a room, they haven't done this before. It's totally understandable, right? That's one thing. Another is like typically culture is kind of broken, at least from an engineering perspective, more broadly speaking, but also engineering. So defining, establishing culture, and then really doubling down on culture. Those are like the two main things. And then the last is probably recruiting. They don't know how to recruit. Um, so with Sonder, this is the same playbook at actually every single company I've joined. It's surprising how often this is a problem. One, just like put in the foundation, like what are the different levels of engineers? What are the different tracks? What does it mean to be junior versus senior? What are the different manager types? What does it take to be? You should kind of putting in the basic plumbing so you can have a functioning organization, right? So before you play the game, you should like set down the rules of the game, right? So get that in place first, and that's pretty straightforward because a lot of stuff I've already seen, I've done. One of those pieces is comp bands, right? And I put these things in place because I know that I have to build out a team. You can't build a team unless you have these things, because comp is one of the most controversial things you ever talk about with engineers, right? Or anybody actually. So just putting down the plumbing in place. Once you have that in place, and you look to hiring, then you think about it's not just about ability to code or the technicals; those are easy to vet. You have to decide what kind of culture you want to develop, right? Because for a smaller company, the smaller the company is, the more important it is to have a strong culture. Um, and the reason why is that you're not going to hire some senior staff Google engineer who likes to code in C++ for your starter like that. There's a time where you might need that, but definitely not for a 7-person engineering team. That's Series B, right? You need a bunch of people that are more broad, and you might have to take some risks and gambles because you can't pay the same thing as what Google can pay. And so you can have some constraints on the profile, but what you can control is regardless of your senior, junior, make $1 million or 100K, like you can at least control culture, right? And so if you decide on the right culture that will be conducive to your company thriving and the team eventually becoming a world class team, that will be key. And so that is something that I've learned. That's like a secret weapon. A good leader who can fix a culture or evolve a culture or bring in a fresh perspective on culture can make a massive difference outside of the basics of comp bands and recruiting processes and stuff like so culture is key. So after you get that in place, then you have to engage your recruiting partners because they're the people who support you. This the machinery of all this, right? I think Sonder at that time didn't have recruiting really, at least not the type that we needed. And so this is where I met you guys, and so I partnered with you guys to put together this plan, and that was that worked, and you have to work closely with the recruiting team, right? Because one way to go about it is like throw it over the fence and kind of be like separated from hey, that's not my business. I'm just going to go code. But the other way that I found more effective is to like partner very closely with them, right? Because I think as a leader, I think a big part of your job is just the team, like building the team, developing the team, firing the team, shaping it. Like so to partner closely with the recruiting org plus the people org in general is going to drastically increase your chance of success and getting what you want to get. And there's nothing worse than an engineering leader or any kind of leader who's not working very closely with the recruiting team, because you're not going to end up getting what you want.
I guess maybe a question on, culture for you, can how do you think about culture on an engineering team? How do you try to create a culture that results in a cohesive team that is high performing? I'd love your thoughts.
When I think about what culture is, there's lots of ways to think about it. But for me, culture helps like define or encourage a decision making process, right? And sometimes people think culture is about making people feel good, whatever it could be. But I like to use culture as like a way to help people make decisions, right? That to me provides a lot of value, right? Because the decisions you make are based on your priorities or the way you think, and as much as we like to make data driven decisions, those are easy decisions. The harder decisions are like, who should we hire, who should we fire, how much risk can we take on, how do we reward people, like that those kind of things can be addressed easily with culture, at least 80% of it. And and then kind of just related to that, like the needs of the team at the time, beyond like roadmap or code, tech stack, whatever. The nature of the business, you could better support it through through the influence of culture, right? And at the end of the day, culture scales really well.
On recruiting, and you've hired a ton in your career, are there a couple things that stand out to you in order to run, the most killer recruiting process or go to market recruiting process that you can? If you needed to hire 30 engineers in the next 90 days, how do you what stands out as an important kind of pillar in order for you to go and execute on that?
It's a system. It's a funnel. It's like sales, right? You got a bunch of leads on top, you qualify them, and eventually you close a deal, right? So recruiting is a system. And so it helps me to like just map out my system and understand, what does that look like? Who are the players? What are the goals we have to achieve? Like, 5 headcount by whatever. And so for me, I just go down and treat it as if I'm building an engineering system or a product spec or something. And that's, some people might like, roll their eyes at this, but for me, it helps me influence this from afar without having to be in the weeds. Because if I can set this up, I can teach like a really, excited IC or a manager or like a junior recruiter to be like, hey, I want you to own this. And because it's a system and I understand like the inputs and outputs, we can define what a success look like, or when things break, how we can diagnose it.
Can, from your experience hiring, building engineering teams, what are key traits you look for when building a top performing tech team?
You need to get the technicals right. I wouldn't obsess over them, but like you certainly need people that have talents. And, in that regard, I would probably look for more pragmatic signals, like for example, like for coding, for me, speed means a lot, right? So just simply being a fast coder. I know it sounds silly, but like the best engineers I've ever worked with were fast coders. It sounds dumb, but it's true. It comes down to like they've honed their craft. They're really good at this. They code a lot. Like they're very particular about their process. They've chosen the right environments and IDEs, right? So just simply coding fast, that's something. Problem solving, like they don't have to know the latest technologies or scale tactics, but if I can give them like an ambiguous problem and they can work their way through it using first principles, using intelligence, instincts, that tells me that they could be a really good problem solver. And if I just taught them this thing, they can go really far. And so the technicals have to be there, but I wouldn't, be so adamant about like the nitty gritties of syntax and, optimization. And, you don't have to know everything about theory, but that's important. I think on the culture side, I tend to hire for smaller teams. So I might bias towards certain values, but like, I love people who have like high ownership, right? And I think maybe you could define ownership as the willingness to go beyond the job description. Like nothing is beneath you. You're willing to go out there and get it done, do what it takes to get it done. That's high ownership, right? you don't have a PM, do the PM's job. You don't have a front engineer, find a way to do that. Go look at these AI platforms, right? Like you're just willing to do what it takes to get it done.
So, with your experience in tech startups, building engineering teams for tech startups, investing in tech startups, there's obviously in the past year, a little more than a year now, been this absolute tidal wave of AI innovation. How are you seeing that change the way your engineering team works today? How do you see that changing the future of software engineering? I'd love your take.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an impact, and I think there's going to be some teams who have made it a bigger part of how they work. There's others who like haven't yet ventured in there, but I think by and large it's gonna slowly permeate how we work, whether it's eng or product or design, anybody, and then it's gonna snowball into like taking over a significant chunk, right? And to me, it's just a matter of time where the way we work, I don't know if it's a year out or 5 years out or 20 years out, but the way we work in these kind of high autonomy knowledge jobs, whatever, it's going to be vastly different. Like so I at first I was skeptical about some of these tools, but I started doing some coding and I turned on Copilot, and I can tell you, man, I had the magic moment. I'm like, wow, like this, like if you're a developer and you're not using a Copilot or something similar, like you will be left behind. And that's just like a very small thing. There's going to be more drastic things, in time. We invest in a company that, eventually will replace engineers, or at least some set of engineers, right? So, it's starting small now, but it's going to be significant. And I would recommend any engineering leader or engineering team, like give it a shot, be on the early side of things. Worst case, like it doesn't work for you, but like you at least understand it and see how it could be beneficial. But it's a matter of time. It's crazy, man. I over this week I was actually playing around this like image generation stuff. There's a ton of platforms for this, but like it's crazy how far image generation has come. And then pretty quickly image generation will turn into like moving pictures, video generation.
Sure.
There's like that. There's a Twitter post around the Argentinian president Milei, whatever.
Sure.
And he's doing a speech, in whatever language he speaks, the native language, and they had AI do a dubbing of him, right? So there's a regular dubbing, which is somebody else speaking for him, and the lips don't match, but the AI matches the lips, replicates his voice tone, and puts in the translation, and it looks as if he's speaking English. And we're just like in on this like AI stuff, right? Imagine 5 years, right? 5 years it'll be like speaking in Ilan's voice or something in Russian or some other random thing. So this stuff, man.
In time on that note, you'll be able to go to a platform like Netflix or Amazon Prime or Apple or whatever it is and prompt what type of TV series or movie you want to watch with your partner or your wife or your kid. And hey, I loved Game of Thrones, create, there's obviously all the different ethical and legal considerations that they're working through, but certainly that technology, it seems, either sort of does exist or is going to exist relatively soon.
Yeah. So to me, I'm going to take a little tangent, but so the constraint, the bottleneck is not like our innovation or intelligence around this, but the bottleneck's going to be compute, right? So like the truth is, I'll take image generation as an example. Like if you wanted to like write some text and generate an image, it'll take you like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, right? And that's considered fast, right? It's running on some cloud and AWS or something like that, and so just to create an image, which already is pretty amazing, like it takes time. And so if you want to get to like video, like write a prompt and you get a Netflix episode, like that's compute. So there's just physical constraints for what we'll run into, which is interesting. So if that is a thing, what do you do? Well, it's probably good to invest in NVIDIA or other companies who can tackle the hardware or the
Sure.
capacity problem. But also, because there's this constraint on compute, it's going to force people to innovate around that constraint. It's just like when we had 54K modems, right? People found a way to like compress and do stuff, right? But eventually we got gigabit infinite, right? And we're like, yeah, whatever. But anyways, in the meantime, because of that constraint, you're going to see innovations, more creative ways to run this stuff. Like, I think everything's transformer based, but somebody's going to come up with a new architecture where instead of 20 seconds, it takes 2 seconds. Still not there, but like it's better. And so it's going to be interesting to see how we innovate in the face of these constraints. But I would say, back to your original question. So as an engineering team or any team or a leader, I think it would be very beneficial to stay like on the leading edge of this, right? Because at some point our jobs are going to be gone, man. Like what I explained to you on the recruiting thing, like that should be software. It should be AI. Like it's not rocket science.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing that maybe you and I possess that others don't.
Right.
But that knowledge is going to be the first thing that's replicated when it comes to AI.
Right. So am I hearing you correctly that the way that your engineering teams would work the past number of years, they're coding, they're building product, line by line, essentially, and going in there and fixing things and whatever it is, that can largely, in a future state, largely to a degree now, can be automated to some degree. But you have this skill set. Software engineers are problem solvers. They are.
So what do we do if our jobs are going to be gone, man?
So that's the question. Like, are you going to become a painter? What's the?
Yeah, I mean, so this is like I think the $1 trillion question for like the whole world, right? But so we can kind of talk through some like analogies, right? So like when the calculator got invented, right? It's not like all mathematicians disappeared, right? We still have people still get math degrees. I don't know why, but they do, right? When Google, when spreadsheets were invented by Microsoft, we still have accountants today. They still have jobs. TurboTax exists, but there's still, these accountants still exist. And so I think it will certainly disrupt, offset some population, right? It will take some jobs, if you will, or shift the market. But I think what we'll do is we'll react and focus on higher order problems.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So we can take recruiting as an example. Like some part of your job, could be automated and you might not know the difference, right? So it could be like writing reach out emails. Classic cold start, right? First thing you do is you write some templates, campaigns, whatever. You go from like your intern writing it to like ChatGPT writing it. So like the world of recruiting doesn't get disrupted, like everybody loses their jobs. You just simply say, hey, that problem now is like, here's a black box and it's solved. It just happens not to be human. And then you're moving your energy to a different order problem.
I completely agree.
And in that world, it's also kind of shifting beneath their feet because now if it's easy to like create lots of reach out emails, maybe the nature of recruiting also evolves because what happens is now our inboxes are super noisy with like a trail of 3. Hey, Ilan, you might have got my message. Here's a third one. So like we change, our perception of recruiting changes. And then recruiting also has to evolve as a business or as an art. And so things are so dynamic that I don't think there would be a shortage of needing humans because these what AI is good at is like known problems, whereas humans are good at adapting to new things that are novel, right? So I think we'll always be needed. We'll just be working on different things. It's just the thing is we don't know we can't predict what those things will be, and so we just assume we'll all get fired, right? Which is not true. New problems that we haven't thought of. Right?
No, for sure. I mean, if you think of a doctor who has to chart all the data for their patients and has to write the notes and all, at some point, all of that will be, somehow it'll be fed to AI and into the system, and they can focus on being one-on-one with a patient and thinking through, creative solutions to help them feel better. You know what I mean? Or, maybe in a software engineering perspective, maybe 80% of what a software engineer does today can be replaced by AI, but now you can spend 100% of your time on that 20%. That's more critical thinking, more important, more strategic, more problem solving. And that's huge.
Well, I mean, there'll be like a new 80%.
Right.
They'll be like, oh, these problems are gone, but now like this whole new set of problems now,
Sure.
it'll change,
Sure.
and
So
yeah.
so at Goodwater Capital, you're the SVP Engineering. You guys invest in consumer tech startups. Can you fill me in a little bit about, you know, you've built an engineering team, which is unique at a venture fund, and you've built a platform. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And then I think the follow on is how today have you guys embraced or utilized AI to make your team more efficient?
Yeah. So first, a little bit about Goodwater. So we are a VC firm, and what makes us different is one, we invest only in consumer tech, and then two, we operate with platform and data as like a first class citizen, right? Which maybe at some point was a wild idea, you know, but I think increasingly, as VC evolves, there's more younger people entering VC. Like it's very obvious. So I think we might be somewhat unique now, but we're very quickly not going to be unique. I think this is where things will go, right? Because it's ridiculous to think that there's billions of dollars, that are deployed by like without data or software like that. That's wild to think about, right?
Sure.
So, anyways, so a big part of the way we work is using data and technology to make great investments, but also to be able to support our investment, the companies we invest in, support them in their growth and facing growth challenges, whatever it is that they need. So that's core to the way we work. It's as if Stacked, a recruiting firm, had a software engineering team, because you kind of need software to do recruiting.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely.
Might be a wild idea now, but in 5 years, it's like, wow, why didn't we have an engineering team to do this? So we have an engineering team and data science team. We have product folks. There's a design component. We have ops folks. And all of this is in service of supporting the business, investing, and growing the portfolio companies.
So it's giving you a leg up in terms of going out, sourcing potential deals, analyzing due diligence, giving you guys insightful data on whether it makes sense to invest or not, and then taking it a step further with your portfolio in terms of supporting them and helping them build. I think it's innovative. I think you're smart to, not, to think that that's the way that it's going, and you're going to have to keep reinventing yourself. You know what I mean? As like with us in recruiting, how can technology, how can AI go to market, identify, vet, attract great candidates, help make the recruiting process more efficient, the process with our partners, with our customers more efficient, more friendly, more user friendly, to eventually make better hires. So yeah. And AI, is it something that, like, is your team sitting on ChatGPT or Copilot every single day, or is it kind of something that's not so much? How's that been utilized? Yeah.
So I sent out a big Slack to everybody in engineering, like, hey, ChatGPT, Copilot, game changer. Anybody who wants a subscription, you should do it. I highly recommend it. If you don't use it, I feel sorry for you, right? I already did that. In terms of like leveraging, OpenAI's APIs, we are definitely playing around a lot with it. We had a hackathon actually 8 months ago that was AI themed, and it was crazy. It was just fun, like all the things people were coming up with. So AI has allowed us to more quickly prototype and build things that previously just took a lot more steps. And then coming out of that hackathon, there's actually ideas that persisted, and we bring them into production. And incorporate it into our process. So over time, AI has become has increased its surface area in the way we work, and also the role it plays in driving our products. At the core, we've always had a seed of ML, because if you're looking at all this data, you need a little bit of ML to figure out what's important. But now it's kind of next level. We're like, hey, with AI, with LLMs, what's possible now? I don't think we're only scratching the surface right now. I think as things get cheaper, faster, better, smarter, they're going to start taking more off the table or being a more important part of our stack.
Gotcha. If you were to try to project out, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years, are there particular skill sets or traits of, that are going to be more important for a great software engineer compared to today? Does that look different? Does it not?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know yet if it's like a really big stark change just yet. But I think if you have two candidates and one candidate is more just in tune with what's happening with AI and has been more like educated or knowledgeable about how it can help either that person, him or herself, or the opportunities it can create, from an entrepreneurial perspective. I think that candidate has an edge, and we're still in the infancy, right? And the thing is the barrier to entry for AI is low. Like there's nothing stopping you from like using ChatGPT to like tell it to do something for you. So you don't have to be highly technical. You just have to understand like this is how AI could work, right? And so I think any engineer can do that. New grad, full stack engineer, front end, back end, high scale person, like being competent in AI, like is a very low barrier to entry. It's just really your activation energy and your curiosity want to do that. But I would highly recommend, candidates get very familiar with AI, whatever background it is. And the hiring side, to me, it does perk up my ears. It tells me something about them. It tells me that they're curious, that they're intelligent, that they can hack, they're problem solvers. It says something. I don't think I would ding somebody if they just haven't spent time there. That they have various reasons. They might be busy, but like, how can you like miss this? This is one of the most significant develops in like mankind. Like, how could you miss this or not make time for it? So it's so important, man. And
So I
might be
think, I think
skeptical.
almost, yeah, I think almost what I'm hearing from you there is, um, really no matter where you are in your career, but if we direct this to someone who's earlier in their career and is a software engineer, who wants to be a software engineer, who wants to kind of go that path, to dive into leveraging AI as it pertains to building things. Go build things, go make mistakes, just build and use AI to help you build and figure out what it can do, what it can't do. And, and just by doing that, you're ahead of the curve. You're starting to think differently as it pertains to creating great products.
Yeah, I think it's
I
gonna
think
be
it's,
highly helpful. And it's not like I'm saying, hey, go learn AI, or at least how to use AI, and that like becomes part of your job. But I think what's going to happen is over time, AI products are going to start emerging in our lives in the enterprise. And for somebody who's not in tune with AI, they're like, what is this thing? You have this fear to adopt this auto, checker or sentiment analysis, like this thing that's kind of party workflow, versus somebody who's already, ramped up on it. They like embrace it.
mm-hmm.
They're like, oh wow, finally somebody built this. I was hacking it myself, but somebody built it. Now my job is easier. So like, I think you're going to see different reactions to what's inevitable, right? Which is
Yeah.
that it's going to be a bigger part of our lives, and you're better off embracing it as opposed to be that person who rejects the idea of calculators. But like, I'm always going to do it on paper. Screw that. I'm, like that. You're going to get stuck.
You've seen success building high performance engineering teams. Are there, or is there, a principle or a value or something that you've taken with you that you'd say is has been irreplaceable along your journey, um, and that has contributed to your success?
That's a good question, man. Um, I, my career was not intentional in any way. I got lucky and I stumbled into something, right? And so my advice is very biased based on my experience, but there's probably 10 million different ways to become a great leader, right? Not that I'm great, but I found some success. So if there were like a young engineering leader who wanted advice on what could they do to like become great or whatever, I think I found great success in building teams, learning how to build teams. Um, because if you are, if you hire a VP of engineering or CTO or whatever, Like what makes them valuable, right? Is it that they can code really well? Is it that they're really great at architecture? What I found is what really matters when you look at boardrooms and you think of like founders trying to hire their head of eng, like it's really about, can this person build a great team, right? And the definition of great will evolve with the company, right? But like I would say, if you are a young eng leader, do whatever you can to become a great team builder. And when I say team building, I mean like the end to end. How do you hire people? Are you a great partner of recruiting? Can you close people? Can you do 1,000 interviews like last minute, right? Do you understand what it takes to make a team function? The processes, the comp bands, performance metrics. How to fire people. That involves partnering very closely with the people team. Or if you're in a startup, there's no people team. You have to like be the people team. I found that just spending time here and being really good at it has paid so many dividends, right? Because every single year, end of year, or I guess beginning of year, you do the planning for the year, and the most contentious topic is always, how many engineers does the team get? Not like, how many lines of code should we write, or what language should we, like, nobody cares about that, right? So it all comes down to team. So I think if you want to be a great eng leader, or at least one path to a successful career as an engineering leader is to be really good at building, shaping, growing, cutting teams. The hardest thing you'll do as an engineering leader is have to do a riff and say goodbye immediately to like 50% of your team, right? If you've never spent time in the hiring side, the performance side, the comp side, like if you don't know the inner workings of this, that's going to be a really tough conversation for you. And you'll be like, wow, that's what it's about. That's like one moment out of like many moments. But man, that is a critical moment. And to do that well, to have the partners to support you and understand why you got there, that really matters. So learn how to recruit. All eng leaders learn how to recruit.